Welcome to Ripple Impact. Today we have a specialist. Crystal Hilsley is a skilled author, child food advisor, passionate clean food activist, authentic marketing specialist, storyteller, and a mother. She embodies her coined tag phrase, bringing clarity to eating well and having fun. The trademark talks, workshops, and wellness program Crystal delivers brings excitement in the education of our next generation, teaching them the difference between real food and fake food. Crystal received her BS in psychology, is a certified master health and wellness coach, and a certified intuitive eating specialist. She utilizes methods proven to become part of a child's emotional DNA and family support tactics in her work, and incorporates a variety of effective learning tools into each story, workshop, and event, combining her love for helping others with the tools and steps families can easily incorporate to heal nutritional struggles. Crystal believes every family can have a healthy future. Crystal's unique and highly effective approach incorporates participation from the whole family and giving action steps easily incorporated into your daily routine. Welcome, Crystal, to Ripple Impact.
Thank you so much for having me. That was quite the introduction. I really appreciate it.
Thank you, Crystal. It's my pleasure having you, and I'm truly excited, like I said, and I know a lot of our viewers will be excited to hear about this special topic you'll be talking about, because it's not just a thing that one child is faced with. I know a lot of children and a lot of families are having that concern, but I believe after this show today, that will be a thing of the past. So I'd like to know if you can tell us a bit about Crystal Clear Kids and what is the motivation behind it.
So Crystal Clear Kids, I am focused on health, wellness, and nutrition, and I use food and mindfulness to change family relationships to create more calm, confident, and connected kids. So when we look at issues that kids are having, it's not a one-size-all-fits solution for everybody. It's a combined approach of understanding a couple of things that are missing for parents. And those top three things are, as it relates to the field of nutrition and whole body wellness, is food education, of meaning what to properly feed them. And I could go down a whole rabbit hole on how our food system has changed drastically. We're now seeing the results of that with 1 in 6 kids experiencing a lifestyle disease such as obesity. We're seeing the diabetes rates rise. We're seeing 1 in 10 kids be diagnosed with things like ADD and ADHD. And that comes down to the what to feed them. And then the feeding education is how. How do you properly present these choices to them? Because once they've had a taste for the burgers and the French fries and the chips and the ice cream, they're hooked, right? And you can thank the marketing teams and the scientists for formulating those foods that resemble food, but they're not real food. So when you said a moment ago, the difference between real and fake food is we have a lot of food in our system that resembles food, but it's not true nutrition, and you're not satisfied with it. And your bodies and your brain become very addicted to it. So the how do we start backing those things out and start putting in the things that we need them and want them to eat for proper body and brain development. And then the third thing that's missing is understanding child behavior and temperament. So, none of us got a parenting handbook. Surprise, you have this baby and things are smooth sailing, or maybe you had a colicky child, and a lot of times that can be traced back to an allergy that they might have that you're totally unaware of. And we just think to ourselves, oh, this is going to be easy and fun, and I'm so excited to be a parent. And then what happens? And then they've got these really heightened emotions, and they're not the best eaters, or they're not the best sleepers. And so I come in and I say, okay, with Crystal Clear Kids, I have a couple of things. I do sometimes work one-on-one with people, but I have what's an online program called the Family Support Program, and it walks parents through the techniques of using mindfulness, mindset, and understanding how belief systems are created. So from the age of 1 to 7 years old, your belief systems are being created. Your subconscious is being directly programmed, and our subconscious runs 95% of the time. So from 1 to 7, those subconscious beliefs, and meaning the way that children interact with the world around them and how they behave and the habits that they have, are then locked in, and then they lead into the future. So I have the online support program, the family support program. It's an online program, and it walks parents through, how to navigate that area and how to calm your kids down effectively. And then I talk about things like gut health, right? That your gut and the foods that you put in your stomach go straight to your brain via your vagus nerve. Your amygdala is directly affected by certain foods, and your amygdala is your fight or flight response. Then your amygdala talks to your prefrontal cortex, which we know now isn't actually properly and fully developed until around the age of 25. So this amygdala, which is this fight or flight response, is then sending directions to your prefrontal cortex, which is your decision-making center. And so when you see kids that have emotional outbursts or they're anxious, how do we provide them the right nutrition, and how do we communicate to them effectively? So I talk about gut health, I talk about stress, I talk about what should be in a kid's diet and on their plate, and kind of defy a bit of what the original food guidelines were that set the standard American diet. And then we've seen, a generation later riddled with disease. And then I end it with my expertise and my experience with what's known as parent-child interactive therapy. So it actually teaches parents how to effectively communicate with their children to get the behaviors out of them that they want and they desire, and to ultimately allow kids to feel safe and seen and heard and secure. Because when kids feel safe, then they're free to be who they are, and they're relaxed and they're fun and they're playful and they're creative, which are all the things that we want our kids to experience in life.
Wow. That sounds like a lot, but I think it's something that it's quite important, because I know managing certain things, especially when it has to come with diet for kids, it's a very, very sensitive issue. And it's something that a lot of people think, well, if my kid keeps eating this, along the line, they are very active. They'll burn out, for instance, excess sugar or excess fat or things like that, that since they are growing, they will burn them out. But from what you're saying, it could have a long-term effect on the kids. Wow.
It does have a long-term effect on kids. And that's where, that's one of the things that I hear quite often is, my kid runs around all day. They can eat what they want, or they're just going to burn it off, or they're just kids, or they think to themselves, this too shall pass. And I hate to be the one that comes in as the bearer of bad news and say, actually, the habits and the attitudes and behaviors that they're expressing right now are going to continue to be expanded upon and be more concentrated as they become teenagers, and then lead into adulthood. So the important act of parenting is in those formative years, from 2 years old up to around 12 years old, because at 12, 13, their brains start to change again. And they're like, oh, okay, so everything I learned in these last kind of 2 sections of my life, everything happens in a 7-year cycle. In fact, your entire body down to every cell completely regenerates itself every 7 years. Wow. So change can happen, 100% it can. I'm living proof of that. I damaged my own health in college, and then I damaged my health again in my late 20s. And I learned from both of those experiences, which is why I'm so passionate about this work, because I was raised by a granola mom, and she had a garden in the backyard. So we picked our own food and ate it. And I wasn't allowed things like candy and soda. It was, of course, sure, we had pizzas and we had parties and we had Halloween, treats and things like that, but it was not a part of my everyday life. It just was not a part of my diet. So I was raised that way. So then when I went off to college and I ate all this junk food like pizza and fried raviolis and ding dong and sodas all the time, I got sick really fast. And I healed myself just as fast, though, because I went back to the diet that my body thrives on. And so we're seeing this change in food production and food processing that, as I said a minute ago, it resembles food, but it's not true food, because the mineral density of the soil has been depleted. And so regenerative farming is this new buzzword. And so actually another side of my business, there's kind of 2 sides. I work corporate, business to business. And then my passion, though, is with the consumers, to educate them and to give them the tools, because to make the changes that you want to see in your kids can actually happen really fast. Okay. It's just being prepared with the right steps and with the playbook to do that. And so we can absolutely get into that whenever you'd like on the boundaries and kind of what meal times look like, and how I look at mealtime as a point of connection for families, because we all have all of these things going on all the time. And young children, especially, if you ask them what they want the most, you would be shocked to hear that they actually want time with you as their parent. So how can you create times to connect with them? Take them to the grocery store with you, have them pick out the foods that they might be interested in trying and maybe try it a different way. Science has proven that children need to try something 11 times of tasting it before they decide that they like it or not. And further, science has proven that if you were to cut the food up into a fun shape or arrange it into a funny face or something silly on a plate, they're 4 to 5 times more likely to eat it. So that's the number one thing, is take them to the grocery store with you, or if you have the opportunity to create a garden in your backyard, that would be a super fun project, especially as we're all stuck inside right now. But getting them involved with understanding where their food comes from and eating and incorporating as many whole foods as possible is really, really important. So again, take them with you, have them pick out those fruits and vegetables. And then when you get home, have them help prepare them, because we all learn as humans. I think the statistic is a good 80% of us learn kinesthetically, which is through exposure and through action. So if a child is, touching that broccoli and help preparing it and maybe breaking the stems off, and you cook it a few different ways, look up different recipes together, and then have them help, a 3-year-old, a 2-3-year-old can set the table with plasticware. An 8-year-old can peel potatoes, right? And you can use sweet potatoes instead of regular yellow potatoes because they're filled with so many great vitamins that our bodies need. And have them involved in that process. And you'll see how much you actually enjoy spending time with them, because as parents, we're their first teachers, right? We're their very first source of information. And we have so much influence on how their lives will form and how they're shaped and how they're developed. And that's a really beautiful opportunity for you guys to enjoy each other, because time is what? It's the only true asset that we have, because we don't get any more of it. You can't manufacture it. And as you know, you now have an 8-year-old, and my 2 stepkids who I raised half the time, one is 21 now and one is 18. They're gone. My little girl is 10, and I look at baby pictures and I'm like, where'd she go? It flies by. So we have this beautiful window of opportunity to spend time with our kids. And so mealtime brings us together. And spending time at the dinner table together as a family is not something that we as humans have experienced historically. This is actually something new as of the last couple of 100 years, just by change of the way of lifestyle and dynamics. But dinner time, it reduces stress levels. People eat healthier, kids do better in school, and kids will actually report and say that they really enjoy that time with their parents. So if we can then have them prepare, get to the dinner table, there's no screens. These are my boundaries, no screen time. If you've got a kid that, really says, okay, I'm going to take a couple of bites and I'm done. Nope, 10-minute timer, you have to sit here. It doesn't take much longer than 10 minutes to eat. And take the focus off of the meal. Don't hover saying, okay, you have to have so many more bites. No, talk about everything else. Talk about the weather, about, their new favorite game that they're playing or book that they're reading. Just have normal family conversation and just eat your dinner, showing to them through actions, because kids repeat our actions, not our words, right? They're going to do exactly what we do. So we have to set that example. And this starts at a very young age. You've got a baby in a high chair at 1-year-old. You can just sit there and eat your lunch and just let them do their thing. And then they'll get in line with and see that mealtime is about us connecting and coming together as a family. And it's a really beautiful experience. If you've got a kid that's taking too long to eat, you can set a timer and say, okay, you've got 20 minutes to finish your meal. And then when you've got the scheduled meal time, because as I said earlier, kids thrive when there's structure and when there's rules and boundaries. They absolutely thrive because they know what's expected of them. And so again, it allows them to feel safe, which is what we want. So you have your scheduled meal times. So we'll say, okay, dinner's at 6 o'clock, bedtime's at 8:30. You have dinner at 6 o'clock. And if they say, that's it, I'm done. And you always give them like one safe food, one thing that they'll eat. But if you're introducing a new food, and even if they've helped prep it and they say, no, I tried a bite and I don't like it. Okay, that's fine. You don't have to eat it. We're never, ever going to force them to eat it, because we don't want to give them a bad experience at that meal. But say, okay, just keep in mind, the kitchen's closed at 6:30. So if you don't want to eat, you don't have to. But when we're finished with dinner, we're not opening up the pantry and ravaging the fridge with whatever you want, because then that just leads to more unhealthy habits. And what happens with parents is there's this very visceral response, and I know it myself. We think to ourselves, oh my God, my baby's starving. They need to eat something. And you bend the rules and you just give them whatever they want because you think they're going to starve themselves and know they need to eat and they're going to feel better once they eat. And when kids are hungry, that's the number one reason for a meltdown, is because they're hungry. Their blood sugar is dropped. They actually do need to eat, right? But we've got to learn to, as parents, how to support them properly. And that's through providing those boundaries and that structure and the right healthy whole foods that their bodies need in order to develop properly. So when we set those boundaries, it actually teaches them to follow their own hunger cues. Because if they're sitting there at the table and they've got a screen in front of their face, how are they going to know when ghrelin and leptin are doing their jobs? And those are the two hormones that control when you're hungry and when you're full. So they can't pay attention to those triggers, which our body tells us, hey, you've got to eat, or hey, you're full, if they're zoning out and they're looking at a phone or they're looking at a device. So you've got to get the devices away from the table.
Wow, that's quite insightful. It means mealtime is not time for TV. That means the television has to be turned off. It has to be a family time. So is this supposed to be like for all the meals, breakfast, lunch, dinner, or you should have, you do this for special meals? Do you have to do this for all the meals?
I recommend having the TV off at mealtime always, right?
Okay.
I only allow my kids like an hour a day of TV. That's really all they need. Outside of that, their brains start to kind of fizzle out, and they've shown that they actually get addicted to it. And I want her to, to experience her creative side and to color and to draw and to sing and to dance and do all of the things that are helping her develop socially and mentally and emotionally. So I don't have TV on ever at all, and I don't recommend it during any meals. Breakfast and lunch are a little bit more relaxed because maybe as a parent, you're making them breakfast and you're kind of tidying the kitchen and doing the other things that you're doing, but you're still there and you're still present with them. Lunchtime, I absolutely, if you're home with your kids, absolutely sit down and make lunch. Something where maybe it's more relaxed and maybe you're sitting at the kitchen countertop instead of at the table. But at dinner time specifically, that's usually when the entire family is together, and it's so important to have family conversations and to share the wins and losses of the day. And it's actually a game that we incorporated in my house years and years ago. We call it sweets and sours. So tell me something sweet about your day and tell me something sour. And so when the kids would talk about something that they lost at or they failed at, I'd actually celebrate that, because that's how we learn, is through failure. We're so afraid to fail, but it's the one thing that teaches us these golden lessons. Because when you failed and you've had that experience of losing out, guess what? You won't do it again, will you? Because you remember that lesson. If everything was easy all the time and we always had all these wins, then where would be the experience of the polarity of understanding how life works? Because life is a series of constant ups and downs for all of us.
Wow. So you made mention of eating whole food, right? Incorporating it to your meal, which is very important. Can you just mention some of those that one should have incorporated in their meals? I mean, the minimum, right? Because I know there's a lot out there. Just give us an idea of what you think should be incorporated in a typical dinner.
Sure. So the original food pyramid was created, which I think, and I'm hoping anyways, has been scrapped because there's been so many problems with it, right? They would recommend between 6 and 11 servings of grains a day, and that's so much. So I always recommend a highly plant-based diet, and there have been hundreds of studies, if not thousands, on the Mediterranean diet and how great that is for our bodies as a species, right? I don't believe in taking out all meats. I don't believe in taking out all sweet treats and snacks. But if you can start in the morning, let's say with, there's like 3 things that I always recommend to people, kind of do a variation, because we all get stuck in food ruts. And so I do like an oatmeal and I mix in chia seeds so they get their fiber and their omega-3s in there, which are these beautiful fatty acids that help their brains develop, and add a natural sweetener like a maple syrup or a honey to it instead. And if you can, add some fresh berries. You can never overdo it with fruit. In fact, there's another study, I mean, you can see I love the science behind things, that they tested people to see if you could overindulge in fruit, and you can't. There's not a problem with eating the whole fruit. Juicing is a different story because that does spike your blood sugar and it gives, your insulin levels raised too much, and then it gives your pancreas a really hard time. But whole fruits with the fibers in them are great. So that's a great idea for a breakfast. Is you can do the soaked overnight oats, and you can do them the night before. Most kids like them warm though. I don't mind them either way. So that's a great, breakfast opportunity or option. The second one is like scrambled eggs with some bell peppers. Most kids love bell peppers because they're a bit sweet.
Yes.
Some healthy avocados, some onions, some garlic. So any kind of vegetables that you can incorporate in some type of veggie scramble is phenomenal. And then the last one that I always recommend as well is a good plant-based yogurt. So there are so many different options of yogurts out there that are non-dairy, and I'm an advocate against people consuming cow's milk dairy for a number of reasons. And if you want to know, I'm happy to share that. I never hold back. So I look at it in two ways. I look at it scientifically and I look at it logically.
Okay.
So I was raised drinking low-fat milk, and so I didn't know that there was necessarily a problem with it, or think that there was. But then when I had my experience when I had my daughter, and I breastfed her up until she was about a year old, and I always say this, I always add this in, I was very lucky to have a very good experience, because I know that there are some mothers out there that struggle with it. So I was very lucky to have a great experience breastfeeding. And so when she got to about a year old, I was like, okay, I'm kind of burnt out on this. It's time to start transitioning her. You hear everywhere, give them whole milk or give them this formula, because kids need, up until the age of 2 years old, they still need all of the proteins, all of the fats, and all of the lipids from milk in order to help their bodies and their brains grow. But I was visually sitting there thinking to myself, how am I going to stop breastfeeding her and put her on a cow teat? And that was the visual that I had. And I couldn't get my head around it. I was like, this just doesn't make sense. Why are we the only species that's drinking the milk of another species? You don't see monkeys drinking goat milk, and you don't see elephants drinking, cat milk. It just, we're not biologically wired, or it's not, and it's also not bioavailable. So then you ask yourself, okay, well, what's in cow's milk that we're led to believe, because it's marketing, it's not for health, because 70% of people are lactose intolerant, or they have a problem with the protein in cow's milk, which is known as casein. Mm-hmm. So if this is a true health food, how are 70% of the population around the world allergic to it? Because it's not a health food. It was a marketing ploy. So people say, okay, well, there's calcium in cow's milk. And I say, yeah, sure, you're right. However, calcium is a mineral, and it's found in the soil. So cows eat grass, hopefully if they're grass fed. Now the mainstream dairy production is they're being fed what? A ton of grains and a ton of antibiotics. So there really is a low minimal quantity or even quality of calcium. Mm-hmm. So then the calcium that's actually in cow's milk is called calcium glycinate, and it has no way of entering your cells without a chelating agent. So calcium itself, which are in Tums and tablets like that when people have an upset stomach, is a great acid neutralizer. So if we're looking at it from both sides, logically, this doesn't make sense. And then also, if my bones are leaching calcium, so they've done studies, right? You can look at, there's a variety of them, from the China study to, multiple other studies that are out there showing that people that drink high amounts of cow's milk, and this isn't just the milk, that's cheese, that's yogurt, that's ice cream, that there are actually higher rates of bone fractures and osteoporosis. So then why are we still as a species subscribing to this marketing ploy to push this ingredient into our bodies that we don't actually need? So I actually have a list of calcium rich foods, and they're dark leafy greens, and they're foods that we eat every day. And then there's also, I was finishing off with breakfast. Okay. There's so many great alternatives for cow's milk yogurt that are really high in protein and really high in calcium. And the biggest ingredient in yogurts that I have in my fridge all the time, it's always stocked, is the probiotics, because that feeds the good bacteria in our guts. And we have 4 pounds of bacteria in our guts, which balance and create all of these neurotransmitters and hormones and help us digest our food. So there's, we like coconut milk. I personally drink oat milk. My daughter loves almond milk. So we have these great yogurt parfaits where I throw on some great granola, whether I make it myself at home or whether I buy one that's got no, low sugar or no sugar at all, or maybe it's sweetened with honey, and we throw a ton of berries on there. And that's those are 3 of our favorite breakfasts that I recommend, to everybody. It's not really that hard. It's just so much easier. And I get it, to grab a box of cereal. And there are cereals out there that are fantastic, But if you're feeding your kids things like Fruit Loops or Captain Crunch,
Yes.
and then you're sending them off to school, look at the amount of sugar that's in there just in itself. And labels have changed, at least here in America. They will show you on the label itself the total grams of sugar, but if you look to the right and you've got the grams per item that's in the box, and then to the right of that you have the DV, the daily value percentage. If it says in there there's 20 grams of sugar per serving, which a serving is like a tiny little half a cup, it actually is missing on the DV percentage, because if they put that in there, you would be blown away. So kids should only have, up to, I'd say 8, 9 years old, around 25 grams of sugar a day. That's added sugar. And all of the sugars that are in cereal are added sugars, because cereals themselves, the whole grains, they're sugars that, there's simple and there's complex carbohydrates and simple sugars as well. The sugars that are in those cereals, my point is that they're added sugars. And so you're sending your kid off to school with sugar in their stomach, or to start the day with sugar. And then what happens? Sugar is this burst of energy, and then they've crashed. Wow. And then they can't handle it, and their brains are like, I'm so hungry, I can't handle it. And their brains are surviving on sugar. And then they've crashed and they have nothing in their stomach, no protein, no lipids, no fats. Fats are phenomenal to really satiate them and to allow them to thrive throughout the day.
Wow. So Krista, I was wondering, you being a passionate clean food activist, what does that mean? How do you go about this? Being passionate, clean food and activist in it. People will be wondering, is there anything like being a clean food activist? So tell us what this is about, being a passionate clean food activist.
Sure. So the other side of my business, as I said, it's business to business. And so I have a company called Crystal Clear Nutrition Group, which is actually the overarching parent company to Crystal Clear Kids.
Okay.
And so in Crystal Clear Nutrition Group, I work with real estate development companies, I work with properties, I work with restaurants, I work with community organizations, and I create for them their nutritional guidelines, what they're actually going to be feeding their end users. So whatever their chef is going to prepare and create, I give them those guidelines of these are the oils that you need to cook with, and these are the types of foods that you're going to incorporate, and these are the foods that you're going to avoid. I further create for them their menus. And so I go in and I redesign their menus. And so it's all around, performance and recovery, because food is fuel, but food is also a source of nourishment. So there's this kind of disparity in people's train of thoughts around food. And I believe that food is meant to be enjoyed. I enjoy eating. I eat all day. I love food, right? But my taste buds have changed as I've cleaned up my gut. So what tastes good to me might not taste good to the next person, because their taste buds are, craving the salty, fatty, sweet, sugary things, because that's what their bodies are addicted to. My body isn't addicted to those things. So I find nourishment through kale and through spinach and through spirulina, and I enjoy that stuff, right? And so I create the menu guidelines and the menus and the nutritional guidelines, and then I work with them to install and implement an urban farm. And as I said earlier, regenerative farming is kind of the new word and the buzzword right now in the industry. And what that really just essentially means is going in and helping a property that has the space to put in a small micro farm. We help regenerate the soil and make the soil not only carbon neutral, but carbon negative. So we're giving back to the environment. We're not stripping from the environment anything. And so the food itself comes out so nutrient dense and so beautiful and filled with the minerals that it needs. And so it's a process behind balancing what the soil needs, because the soil needs like the things like the calcium and the magnesium and the K1 and things like that. And so if there's an overproduction of K1, for example, you don't want to pull the K1 out of it. You want to balance it out with calcium. So there's a lot of properties and projects that are popping up all over the globe that are looking to not only provide their clients and their end consumers with a really great experience around whole food and clean food, but creating those menus that really get them excited about it and showing them, hey, you can make this in your backyard. You can make a micro farm in your own backyard. You could create even a tower garden if you live in an apartment and actually cultivate your own fresh food, with that's really nutrient dense. And so that's what Crystal Clear Nutrition Group does. Is I work with big real estate development projects, as I said, kind of urban housing projects and communities to create for them these agri-hoods and really get whole fresh foods into the general public and day to day, because I believe we all should have access to whole, fresh, nutrient dense food all the time. When I see things like, it's a real thing, there are food deserts where people are literally going to 7-Eleven or a really bad store, and that's where they're getting their food. It's these exist right here in America. We want to talk about some of the problems in America. People don't have access to whole, fresh foods and clean water. And it blows my mind in the time that we live in, that we have the technology, we have the means, we have the people that are willing to do the work. It's a matter of driving the organization forward and having it be something that makes it accessible for everybody. So that's how I'm an activist. And I could talk about this subject all day long. And I believe, as we circle back to the problems that kids are facing, it makes me really sad personally to see kids struggling or labeled things like ADD or ADHD, and perhaps they are, and perhaps medication is the only thing that works for those parents and those families, but there is a better way. 90% of kids that have ADD and ADHD, or they're tested or diagnosed as that, they're actually missing magnesium, and it's found in the soil. Well, so if they're not getting it from their food, which is fine because sometimes it can be difficult, then let's supplement them with it, right? And let's figure out how to get magnesium in their body, because it's a nerve nourishing mineral. So again, if you've got those signals going from your gut, triggering your amygdala, sending directions to your brain, these kids are basically having anxiety and they're jumping around all day and their brains are just overexcited, then how do we calm them naturally? And if medication is still needed, I'm never going to sit here and say, don't put your kid on medication, but how can you support them naturally? And maybe then after you do that, they might not need the medication.
Wow. True. That's quite true. I see you have your hands full. You have so much you do. How do you start your day? What's a typical day for you?
It depends on the day. There's some days that I might sleep in a little bit, but I exercise every single day. Even if it's just a walk around the neighborhood, I get out and I get fresh air, and I might listen to an audiobook on topics that I'm really interested in learning. I practice mindfulness practices. I take supplements, my supplements first thing in the morning. I take my probiotics. I take my iron. I take my vitamin D. Again, 70% of us, no matter where you live, even though I live here in San Diego, we're vitamin D deficient. And I make myself a drink that's 4 ingredients. It's ginger, fresh turmeric root, coconut water, and aloe vera gel. So I actually buy the leaf itself and then I blend all those together. So the very first thing that I do when I wake up, the very, very first thing when I open my eyes, and I've trained myself to do this because it wasn't always this way for me. I had depression, I had anxiety, I had crippling panic attacks. I went through a very big life change about 7-8 years ago. And so I trained my brain to wake up and to say thank you. And just thank you for opening my eyes. Thank you for having a roof over my head. Thank you for my bed. And it's all of those small things that we're grateful for and that we practice gratitude and thankfulness that wires our brain to be positive and happy. And I think that we all should be positive and happy. Is it realistic to be positive and happy all day, every day? Of course not, because we're all faced with stress and challenges. But it all comes down to, when you're faced with a challenge and you're faced with a stressor, are you going to react? Or are you going to respond? Because when you react, you're reacting from a place of fear and scarcity and an old subconscious program that I'm not safe. But when you're able to center yourself and breathe through it and stay calm, then you're able to respond. So yeah, so that's how I wake up every single morning. I get my exercise, I take my supplements, and then I take care of my daughter. I take an hour, I block it out of my schedule to get her ready for school and connect with her and start her day off. And she takes her supplements as well. Wow. She struggles with a little bit of anxiety. She has some things in her life that were some challenges at a young age. And so I make sure she's balanced and centered and give her the biggest breakfast I possibly can to get her day started off right. Yeah. And then throughout the day, it really depends on the day, because when you run a company, as you know, you can have these sparks of creativity that come in, and I love to write and I love to create content and I love to share. And so some days I can get zoned out and get into that state of deep work, which is so fun, and you're in flow and you're just, writing and you're just feeling inspired. And then some days I'm doing the typical, entrepreneur role of business development and working and finding new clients. So we've actually white labeled our family support program to a number of different active lifestyle and sports communities and organizations. So we then co-brand everything for them, and then they spread the content out to their community. So I work with them on different marketing techniques. And then, yeah, I mean, it just kind of depends on the day. Some days I've got, some busy meetings, but as I said before we started our call, I had a couple of meetings this morning and some things that I was working on. And then I was like, you know what, I'm going to have this chat at 11 o'clock. And I turned on a playlist that I have on Spotify. If anybody wants to find me, you're welcome to. It's called Celebrate.
Okay.
And I just turned up the Sonos in the house, and I was dancing around and just releasing that energy throughout my body, and just being so grateful and just happy of, okay, today's such an amazing day. And then got into our interview. So it was a fantastic way to, raise my energy. Music raises our vibration. It does the same thing for kids. And so when I do have the opportunity to work with parents, whether it's within my group or just online in general, I always share with them, put music on, even if it's softly, even if it's just like a piano tune in the house, just have music playing, because it totally changes the vibration in the house and makes everybody more relaxed and happy.
Wow. That sounds like a secret that I will pick up from here. And by the way, the juice you make every morning sounds like a good one. I'm going to give it a try. I sure will give it a try. Thank you so much. I would like to ask you to give a word of advice to our audience.
Sure. As it relates to picky eaters?
Absolutely.
All right, so let's do a couple of phrases then, because this is one of my favorite ones. As I said before, using the phrase, "you don't have to eat," is very simple, and it will diffuse any kind of potential tantrum or meltdown. Hey, you don't have to eat, but the kitchen's closed, or you've got 10, 15 minutes to eat. And so just keep that in mind, that you don't have to eat. And then them saying, okay, I really, really want this treat. Well, we're parents, and we don't just deprive them of the joys of life. We can allow them to have treats, and you probably do every single day. And that's totally fine. It's the quantity and the quality of it as well, right? So you can say, hey, you can have that treat, but remember, we're only allowed one treat a day. So do you want it now, or do you want it later? And then that will relax them, and that will give them that sense of empowerment and choice. And kids love to have choices. So then when you're presenting snacks, this is a great one. They're demanding whatever it is. Okay, so you've got in your head, and you've meal planned, and you've prepped out and said, okay, our snacks this week look like granola bars and grapes. They look like, apples and peanut butter, or like carrots and hummus. And those are kind of our snacks throughout the day. So give them two choices. Say, okay, you can have the carrots and the hummus, or you can have the apples and the peanut butter. Which one do you want? And then they feel like they're choosing, when in actuality, you were the one providing the choice. So, when there's food, kids will eat. And I would never suggest trying to starve your children by any sense of the imagination. But if they're demanding hamburgers and French fries and pizza, and that's all they'll eat, you have to just find some inner peace and some patience, and not let them trigger you, and say, okay, that's fine, I appreciate that. And maybe make it a special day on the menu for that week, of saying, okay, on Friday we're going to do pizza, or on Friday we're going to do burgers and fries. But the other days throughout the week, we're going to have things like salmon, or pasta, or roasted Brussels sprouts, or some other type of fish, or whatever it is that's a normal meal for you guys. But when it comes to that one special day, then yes, they can have that kind of treat type of meal that's not really that great for them. But at the same time, we do have to enjoy the process of parenting, and allow them to feel like they've got one over us every once in a while, so that they feel empowered and strong. But yeah, diffusing their tantrums is done pretty quickly, because, again, another scientific fact around emotions is, as I said earlier, there are 4 reasons for a meltdown. Number 1 is hungry. Number 2 is angry. Number 3 is they're lonely, and number 4 is they're tired. So if they're hungry, then right, okay, snack time is around the corner. Now it's time to eat a snack, and then they'll feel better. If they're angry, the emotion of anger actually only lasts a sum total of 90 seconds. And I challenge you to do this the next time that you get angry, because I get angry, we all get angry. Anger is just an emotion.
90 seconds.
And look and set your watch, and you'll see that it only lasted 90 seconds, and that's it from start to finish. The problem is that closing that loop and integrating that emotion and that experience is where people get stuck, specifically kids. So a lot of times they're in their right brain, which is their emotional brain, and they're having this meltdown, having this tantrum. And we as parents are in our left brain, which is logic and lists and organization and rules and guidelines, right? So this kid's having this meltdown, they're in their right brain. We're parents, we're being in our left brain, and we're thinking to ourselves, and we're probably telling them, stop, calm down, that's enough, I'm tired of your tantrum, when we need to meet them with our right brain. And 90% of the time, if you go to your child when they're having that meltdown and you just hug them and hold them, they'll relax. It seems counterintuitive, I know, and you just feel like, you're just having a tantrum, I want you to get away from me right now. That's them actually reaching out for you and wanting connection. So it's that 90-second loop of, okay, let's get in our right brain, let's be empathetic, let's share with them our emotion of love, and let's connect with them in this moment. Once they're calmed down, then you can go back into your left brain with them, start integrating those emotions and talk about the experience objectively, not subjectively in that moment with them.
Wow.
Did that answer your question?
Absolutely does.
Okay.
In fact, you gave me more insight that I was looking forward to.
Oh, good.
Thank you.
Good.
And by the way, I love the fact that you made that our emotions, as in tantrums or whatever, last just 90 seconds. I never thought about it in that direction before now. I never thought about it in that direction.
You see people that are constantly angry, and you're like, well, hey, why are you angry? Well, this thing happened. What happened? Well, it happened 5 days ago. Well, so from 5 days ago, you're still mad, or from a year ago, or whatever. Okay, let's get present and let's be mindful of where we're at right now, because that thing happened, and that's known as depression. That happened in the past. It's over. You can't go back and change it. So what do you want to happen right here, right now in the present? And it's the same thing with anxiety. You're afraid of the future. Okay, well, the future hasn't happened yet either. And if and when you are faced with a challenging situation, have trust in the fact and knowing that you will survive it, because your success rate right now of surviving your hardest days is legitimately 100%.
Wow. So Crystal, if our viewers wants to get in contact with you, how can they reach you?
My website is crystalclearkids.com. And then on social media, it's at Clean Eating for Kids is the page and the group that I have. But my website will link you to my social media channels, and it's super easy, crystalclearkids.com.
Crystal, your website and your social media handle is crystal clear. Thank you so much for being on the show.
Good. I hope. That's my point. I like being direct.
Thank you. And truly, I'm grateful to have you on this show today. And I believe our viewers have picked up tons of information. I personally have, and I've been equipped as well with more arsenal to use in, diffusing tantrums and all of that from my kids or from, anyone around. And I truly appreciate this fact. And I look forward to having you again on this show so you can talk about some other things that you do, because I know you do so many things. Really nice having you on the show today. Thank you.
Thank you so much for having me.
My pleasure.
Okay, have a great day.
You as well. Bye for now.
Bye.